There are so many issues here. There's just been a new budget from Mr. Chadambram, the Finance Minister. Most of you will be aware there has to be an election by May of next year after 5 years. There's a lot of pressure on the Congress Party. There's the new power of each of the states making Delhi less relevant in so many ways. There's the uncertainty about what the BJP are going to do in this new election, added to which there's the whole issue of corruption, particularly after Anna Hazara's push 2 years ago. Where has that got to? The credibility of the political class who are going to be putting themselves up for election both nationally, federally, and also in the states. Plus, what has happened after that dreadful event with the rape of the young lady on the outskirts of Delhi just before Christmas, and so it goes on. So there are many, many issues about India. I was with Montek Singh Ahluwalia, who's the Deputy Chairman of the Head of the Planning Commission in Oxford, coincidentally, a couple of nights ago, hearing him on the record talk about where 5% growth is going to go, how much higher it should go, but also the real challenges on infrastructure. He's permanently optimistic, but there are very pragmatic issues which we need to discuss. We've got an hour to do it, and let me introduce who we have on the platform. Anil Dharkar, welcome, journalist, and does everything in Mumbai, including running a festival. So you're here seeing what happens here, and he just said that his next festival is in November in Mumbai, correct? Shobhaa, who I occasionally talk to on a webcam from her home in Mumbai, who's 5 years older than her book, Shobhaa at 60. So welcome. And William Dalrymple, who seems to have a permanent perch at this festival, and has been at the Hay Festival as well, whether it be Afghanistan or India. But he has a farm inside the state of Delhi, and his goats, they graze in Haryana, correct, William? Correct. But for those of you who know India, the fact that there's a state line can make all the difference in so many ways. Look at what's happening to Gurgaon and the way that's developing in a chaotic way. Gurgaon is developing just outside Delhi as if it's part of Delhi, with completely different ways of working. William, I'm going to come to you first as the outsider, but still almost a native Indian living in India. Put on the agenda in 2 or 3 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes only, where you see the critical areas for discussion are.
Well, you mentioned Gurgaon. Gurgaon, I think, is a good symbol of everything that's hopeful and worrying about India. Right. When I arrived in '89, it was a town of about 100,000 people with a small car plant. It's now a town of about 5 million people. The success of Gurgaon has come from the entrepreneurial spirit of the people who moved there and who work there. They're all hungry for success, they're ambitious, hard-working, but they've been incredibly ill-served by their government. And Gurgaon is an example of a sort of perfect libertarian nightmare. It's got these amazing apartment blocks at huge cost with amazingly snazzy flats. But when you go out into the street, into where the state, rather than the individual, is concerned, you end up in roads that are rutted. There are fetid pools of raw sewage outside these incredibly fancy apartment blocks. People that, to get moved from their apartment blocks to the places where they work, because there's no public transport. There's just now a metro, but until this point, there's virtually no public transport at all. Individual call centres and offices have to send out fleets of private cars and buses to move people to their place of work. So it's a kind of, what you have in Gurgaon is something that you find all over India, which is people who, wherever they go in the world, succeed, as you can see in UEA. And you can see in London, you can see in New York, people who are talented, ambitious, hungry for success, but who are screwed every time by their government, which is corrupt, hopeless, and has failed them in every conceivable way. And so what you see in Gurgaon is the clash of those two things: brilliant, clever, entrepreneurial people, and a government that sucks.
And it's got a population now of I think 5 million, and it's running out of water.
Correct. There's no water.
Yeah. And it used to be, I was when it was fields
coming in from outside, it's decanting into the smart apartment blocks. But the people who are living in the shanty towns, the migrant labourers who are building this thing, who live in these juggies at the edge of the town have 20 minutes of water a day, which take you up.
William, quickly, are you optimistic or pessimistic for
In the
India?
very long term, totally optimistic. Because
How long is the long term?
long term is long term.
Well, a year or a decade?
Traditionally, India has controlled for most of history, India has controlled between 20 and 30% of world trade. Until the coming of Vasco da Gama, it was about a quarter of the wealth of the world came out of India. By the end of the colonial period, it was down to about 5%. It's now growing up to again about 10% at the moment.
I think when the British left, it was down to 2%.
2%.
They had robbed us of everything we possessed.
I'm a Scot, I'm halfway between you. Think Braveheart.
But I should put on the record that David Cameron, the British Prime Minister, 10 days ago in India, did express regret in the Amrit Summit.
Too little, too late. And pretty meaningless.
Shobhaa, you have an extraordinary portfolio of interests, including writing soaps, but also being a leading journalist and being very active as well on so many areas. Highlight where you see the real stresses to build on what you've heard from William.
Well, just to add, happy International Women's Day and for all the women. Just to take forward what you said earlier about your conversation with Mantik Singh and his undying kind of spirit of optimism.
He gave a presentation, I didn't have a conversation.
I feel equally optimistic. I think William says long term without specifying how many years. I'd say the next election is a defining election for us, and how India votes in 2014 is going to be defining how we are going to be as a nation over the next 50 years. And for that to happen, I would say that the young of India, I agree, restless, ambitious, impatient, and Gurgaon in many ways represents all that is wrong and also all that is right. It's like a microcosm of young India's ambitions, all in that ghastly colony, if I may. It's a modern day colony with lacks completely in infrastructure, but is very high on optimism and hope, and they don't mind paying for that water which comes in those tankers. So there is an India out there which is looking forward, the young are looking forward, 70% under the age of 30 of becoming actually global citizens. And these are the Indians who don't want, I hope, to leave our shores to look for a better life overseas, as my generation and the generation after that did. They fled because they felt there was nothing that India had to offer. Those same people are coming back, and the young are going nowhere because they know the India story is not that bad a story. The rest of the world possibly has a far worse story, and they're willing to take their chances with India, with all its corruption, with all its churn, with all its contradictions, with all the paradoxes, because they believe in themselves, and our strength are our people, 1 billion strong. And each one of them has hope and optimism, and that's why they are here and proud to call themselves Indians.
Well, one of the things we have to discuss, though, is how many Indians are going to be really disappointed. You've, after all, had 2 days of power cuts in the last few months. 600 million people didn't have power, showing the stress on the basics of life, whether it be water in Gurgaon or anywhere else in major cities, at a time of mass urbanization, with more than half the population soon going to be living in cities. I put it to you, is the next generation going to be disappointed? Because while it can get richer, it doesn't get what it needs.
But it can demand what it wants. Today they're in a position to do it. It was a very, there was a lot of apathy. The young didn't vote. Well, we saw what happened with Anna Hazare and later in the case of Nirbhaya, the unfortunate...
Anna Hazare, the campaign against
the
corruption.
Campaigner, yes, who actually tabled and brought the C word into the public domain. Corruption became a central issue. It was followed by Arvind Kejriwal, who may have fizzled out in his political dreams, but he did name people. He named the biggest and the most corrupt in a country where there were always these nameless people who no one dared to utter their names in public. Well, he did. And I see that as a major move forward with RTI, particularly arming our citizens. You can ask the right questions and get answers. You can demand those answers. You can demand accountability. That's the big shift.
Right, let's move on with those issues shortly. Anil, your assessment, are you optimistic? You said to me you are 60 plus, which is less decisive and definitive than
Well,
You therefore see so much developing in the last few years.
When I said 60 plus, I was not willing to commit like William there.
He's 47.
No, we were not willing to commit what long-term meant. So we are both politicians in that sense.
When you get to this age, William, will your optimism have been...
If like Shobhaa at my age, I'd be happy.
You have to grow your
I am absolutely optimistic, without qualification. In spite of all the problems, all the corruption, the lack of governance, I see hope in everything India does. I see hope in the young. I see hope in the entrepreneurial spirit of Indians, which is exhibited not just in India, but all over the world. Wherever Indians go, they do well. And that's because there's an intrinsic spirit which drives them. And that spirit overcomes obstacles. So when William talks about the lack of infrastructure, how government fails, etc. India, which flourishes in spite of that. And it will continue to do so. I want to go back to what Shobhaa was saying about the next year's elections. I don't think that's going to change anything very much because politicians across any party lines are the same. I think the BJP in general has a very revivalist, reactionary program. All the top leadership of the BJP believes in Hinduism and going back to that. Only Modi is talking about development, but Modi is so badly tainted that he's a problem. He's a problem to the BJP. The industrialists love him because of what he's done in Gujarat in terms of development, but a whole lot of the country hates him. So he will be an extremely divisive leader. Rahul Gandhi, on the other hand, has shown his indecisiveness, his lack of willingness to take on responsibility. So what I'm saying is that we are going into an election which will be in a state of flux. There will be nothing decisive which will happen. We will continue the way we are, but in spite of muddling through, we will do well. If that's not